When a dog feels the urge, he's perfectly willing to take sexual action anywhere, anytime, any place, in view or out of view. He has no guilt, no sense of sin, no worry about what the other dogs will say. He is quite content to fulfill his job, to populate the canine kingdom, and in exchange have some pleasure. A very simple, a very forthright proposition. What could be more well-planned and simpler? Why then does the human race surround this procreative act and all it implies with so much fear, so much darkness, so much secrecy, so many taboos? Only in this age, now, this incarnation for most of you, has there been any opening of investigation and awareness of the sexual nature. All previous speculation has been either hidden, veiled, or absurd. Now, however, it is becoming a matter of great interest. And it's the first major investigations into the nature of sexuality were themselves mystical, cranky, difficult. Why? Why is the sexuality of the human being such a dark and closed area? We will say this, all of you. Now, in some incarnations, your focus on sexual issues is more intense than in others. But we will say this, that in every incarnation, without exception, the sexual nature and issues as they are developed on the sexual level affect every area of your life. Because the sexuality of the human being is at the root, is the root of all of the spiritual issues. It is the deepest representative of the duality. The duality that all human beings have been living in for these millennia. Now that duality is coming to an end with the dawn of a new era, with a new leap in human evolution, the opening to the spirit that creates balanced, triune human beings. Deep, tangled, darkly, in the very bottom of the well, are the roots of the issues that, all of the fear issues that you deal with in all of the incarnations and that you have dealt with for the last 2,000 some years. This 2,000-year period for you spirits here, for all of those who have chosen this particular class to learn a specific set of lessons and understandings, your incarnations, the ones that you're aware of, are clustered in this Christian era. The era of the duality, and the era in which a promise was made of love and forgiveness and refused. There dawned the sexual issues as a hiding place and as roots for all other fear issues. Now you look at that era. Prior to that era, there had certainly been a great deal of sexual activity and licentiousness and all sorts of experimentation and darkness, and you will find many of the psychological theories regarding sexual anomalies beginning in Roman times and in Greek times and prior to that. So why do we point to the beginning of the Christian era? Because, by and large, prior to that, humanity was not free. Humanity was still under the daily guidance of, quote, the gods, guides, who interfered in human life and interfaced with human beings. But things were beginning to change already. We've said before, the shadow of things to come is cast before those events materialize. A new age begins during the closing time of the age that is past. Now, so you look in this age, and you see that the seeds that shall be harvested in the age that is dawning have been planted and nurtured and growing for the last, couple of 100 years. Beginnings, intimations of what was and is to come. So was it there then before the Christian era properly began. Now, we are focusing culturally on the Christian era in the work that we are doing because that's who we're dealing with. There are other myths. We're not saying, well, the rest of the world doesn't count. Only those who have been in the Western Christian tradition. Not at all. But their founding myths, that is to say the storyline, that is to say the curriculum of that particular school of understanding was different. And in China, I would be giving a different speech. You are all involved in this particular process. You are going through, and have been going through, we say have been, to honor the temporality of this world, but in fact these lives are going on simultaneously. You have been going through a process that emulates the process of Jesus the Christ. The years in the wilderness, the toddling steps at the beginning, the beginnings of wisdom. Now, each and every one of you is going through the process of the death and the transcendence of death. The death of your old, fear-ridden Homo sapien selves, kicking and screaming, and the birth of your triune, whole, end of the duality selves. It is a painful period, and a difficult period in many ways, but you are coming to life, finally. You are emulating the Christ. Well, in that context, your sexual natures are in the tomb. The sexual nature is at that point of death, rebirth. Jesus entered the tomb dead. Christ left the tomb living and exemplifying the eternality of being. You are doing the same in your own lives. You are going through a process. The sexual nature is the root of all of the issues that you have been dealing with. A human being is a sexual being. The way you relate to yourself sexually, the way you relate to the opposite sex in your sexual nature, are all crucial in the development of understanding of the kind of fears you are dealing with and how finally to release them. All over the civilized world, the sexual nature is badly misunderstood. It is viewed either as a fount of perpetual bliss or as a source of constant temptation and the agony of punishment. Its dual nature is not widely recognized. Consciously or subconsciously, it is generally thought of as something that one has to deal with, but of very dubious propriety, a matter often best left unexamined. If, after all, you are able to function sexually and you're able to stagger through your romantic life with a minimum of disasters, then why do you have to peel away those layers and look down into what must surely be a cesspool and give yourself all of that trouble and open that Pandora's box? Because that is the source. That is the source. And what you believe about your sexual nature is, I assure each and every one of you, most assuredly not true. You have ascribed to that sexual nature every bit of darkness, sin, guilt, fear that you can find within you, and locked it away so you don't have to look at it. So it pervades your unconscious, so that it affects every action that you take, sexual or not, because you are so out of control, because you will not see, you will not learn, you will not know of that nature. In it you have hidden the consuming guilt that has been the luggage and the yoke for the human being. We have in an earlier time pointed out that sense of universal guilt can be traced back to Atlantean times, where you lost a world, where you lost a civilization, where through pride and overextension of yourselves, you destroyed everything in your life and had to escape. And at some other time we'll get into more detail regarding the analogies there with the Garden of Eden and so forth. That guilt has always been with you. That guilt was re-triggered. Now, just as you know, in your own lives, in each incarnation, you're born into that life with latent issues, and they must be triggered into life, triggered into materialization by events, persons, situations in the early life. So is it on a humanity-wide basis with this matter of that universal guilt. Latent as a result of the Atlantean experience, triggered as a result of the rejection of forgiveness, the rejection of love, the rejection of wholeness. These rejections led to the burial of the issues that surround them. In every human being's sexuality, sexual nature since then, has dwelt the murdered Jesus. The symbol of this age is the tortured Christ dying upon the cross. Half a story, and the depressing half. What is to follow this age is the triumph of the God who is risen, each of you finally accepting the gift, the wholeness, becoming yourselves. But through this long passage that you are now completing in this lifetime, you have buried your guilt in the sexual nature. And there it has poisoned all of your relationships and all of your ambitions and all of your ideals. Oh yes, for each of you there is a life here and a life there of transcendence over the sexual nature. Where there are many lives where you have quashed the sexual nature, beaten it into the ground so it won't bother you, and have run in the other direction. And so we see these lights burning through history, but flickering because they are not whole, but simply a choice of one aspect of the duality over another. This is the time in human history and the time in your personal history when you are at last ready to release the roots of your fears by opening and understanding your sexual nature, recognizing that it is not the source of sin, but the source of the spirit. Now, chakrically speaking, we're talking primarily about the first and second chakras, the beginnings, the roots. There are no second chakra, that is to say, sexual issues that do not heavily involve other chakric areas, to a degree involving all. But virtually every sexually based issue affects the first chakra, the survival chakra, the root chakra, the second chakra, the third chakra of dependency, the heart chakra of love and the spirit, and so on, depending upon your nature in a particular life. But this life, you must understand, even those of you who say, well, that's really not much of an issue for me in this life, assuming there are one or two of you, even for those who have either quelled that nature into whimpering silence, or who feel that they have brought that aspect of their life into balance at some point, this life or another, all of you, without exception, are going to be dealing now, not a coincidence that we chose this time for this topic, not, as Paul thought, a sure draw, but because this is what you are going to be dealing with now, each and every one of you. For some, it will be overtly more painful than for others because of the nature of the tasks they've assigned themselves this time around. But all of you are going to be dealing with this because all of you have been dealing with the release of fears, and now you come to the root. And you cannot pull the root out, for you've tried that. That's the vain effort of the willpower. And nowhere does the willpower fail so abysmally as it does in attempting to deal with the sexuality. Sexual issues are far deeper and far beyond the relatively feeble efforts of the ego will. No, the roots must be released to wither and withdraw. You have cared well for this plant. You have dealt with its dis-ease, nurtured it, watered it with your willingness, and now you must come down into the roots, letting go of the final impediment to your wholeness. For each of you, these issues will be presented differently but appropriately. The recognition that you need to have, whether you feel these issues too small to be of notice or too great to be dealt with, all of you must be aware that there's a difference now. That all of your efforts in the past, however they may have failed this life or in other lives, that's the past. The difference now is the Christ energy. The difference now is that you've accepted the gift. The difference now is that you are filling with love, and where love exists, fear cannot. you are now engaged in healing your own dual spirit. The breakage that occurred between mind and heart. It is being healed and made whole. And it will be as surely healed and made whole in the area of the sexuality. You now have that power. And again, it's not a power to be hammered in. It is simply the strength that will overwhelm if you simply allow it. It is again an extension of the willingness that has fueled this whole process of transformation for you. Now go once again within yourselves to a deeper and darker abyss, once again acknowledging your ego helplessness to determine what lies in that abyss and how to bring the light into it. Once again reaffirming your willingness to deal with the issues involved so they may be released, because this, my friends, is the last one. The light of love, that is the light of the Christ that lives and lives in each of you, is entering through the crown chakra. And the light that it casts will penetrate finally into the second chakra and the first chakra, into the roots of your issues. And those dark shadows will disappear, because a shadow cannot exist when the light fills you. We say that in exploring the sexual nature, you are exploring a storehouse of fear. Human relationships, well, take a look at them. Love relationships, what a misnomer. So often what you are seeing is not love, but an aspect of fear. Dependency, possessiveness, jealousy, with its concomitants of betrayal and abandonment. You see abuse. You see every face of fear used in the name of love. What a transformation there is when the sexual energy itself is revealed in its wholeness and fueled only by love and not polluted by fear. This is that moment of release. Every one of you, whether you are involved in a relationship currently, whether or not you are married, whether you are widowed or divorced, whether you are heterosexual or homosexual or bisexual, whatever your sexual leanings, will each of you be dealing with relationship and sexually oriented matters over the next several months. This is not a curse that we are uttering. In the past, it might have been. Rather, it is a promise. You are on this path still because you are committed to self-revelation and self-healing. You are committed to your wholeness. You are committed to finding your perfection. You are committed to becoming the God that you are. And because of that, you cannot fail. This process is an opening to joy and to wholeness. You cannot complete your spiritual process and leave the roots in the ground, because they'll grow again. Try to pull a weed out of your yard and leave the roots. The weed that is dying within you is really not dying, as the ego fears, but being transformed into a beautiful flower. Whatever your relationship experiences have been, and the categories are not that many, and everyone falls into one or the other, whatever the issues have been, whether you have been afraid to love, afraid to receive love, whether you have felt yourself not deserving of love, whether you have been angry in your love making and in your love thinking, whether you have been frightened and avoiding the issues, whether you have been taken for a ride again and again and again, whether your entire experience has been one of betrayal, it matters not. The experience of the fear and the triggers for the fear are over. But, just as with all of the other issues you've dealt with, all of which are leaves attached to this sexual area, just as they are giving way and have given way to your own opening to love, just as you feel yourself growing stronger and more confident in your job and in your vision of yourself and your approval of yourself, your confidence in facing your life, feeling your strength and your faith increasing, so is it in this process now. Ghosts will jump out and say, boo. But you don't believe in ghosts. Ghosts cannot touch you. Ghosts are fear creations themselves, not real. And so just as in the other matters in your life, so will it be in the area of relationships, of sexuality, human love. Just what you fear the most will appear to be happening. If you have been dealing with your own sexual nature in your spiritual process in a conscious way and think that you've made some progress and are feeling pretty good about it, you're going to feel yourself tumbling back down the hill. And you're going to give every appearance of having forgotten everything you learned about it, returned to a past self, responding to old tapes and old signals, and you'll look in yourself and you'll say, oh, I'm just disappointed and disgusted, and what use is there? And then stop and say, you know, Plautus said I was going to do this. And he said it wasn't real. That it was just a ghost, a knee-jerk reaction. And that's what it is. The apparent betrayal is an illusion. The threat of abandonment is an illusion. The fear that love is going to be withdrawn from you is an illusion. The fear that you will not be able to show or to give love. The fear that you will not be able to physically respond. Any fear that you have, understand in your heart, it's not real. It's gone. It's a shadow. Turn the light on and it'll disappear. Belief is faith. Faith is the fuel, and faith is increased by the rising of doubts. You've all seen the rhythm in your own process. You'll get to a point and you'll think, I've really got it made now. At last, I am as holy as I always knew I would be. Now I can turn graciously to others and help them up to reach my eminent heights. And always that thought precedes by a moment or a day or a week or a month a total collapse. But finally, when that's happened often enough, you begin to think, wait a minute, déjà vu. I've been here before. And when you're on the top of that mountain and you start to think, I am king of all I survey, and the next step is heaven, remember, whoops, wait a minute now. What always happens when I do that? And when you do slide down, think, I knew this was going to happen, but I know that there's another peak, because in the spiritual journey, you're always at the beginning. But that doesn't mean you don't change. It means the beginning changes. And so we want to remind you of that now, because you're going to, in all likelihood, experience that again. But do remind yourself that this is not the end of all of your hopes and all of your dreams, but the beginnings of the new life that has been being nurtured within you, that it is only the end of fear. For each of you, as we have said, the appearance of the issue will be different, but it will all be relationship-oriented, and the result will be wholeness. Now, I want to mention a couple of other things connected with this matter. The question of the nature of your sexuality. Male, female, heterosexual, homosexual, somewhere in between. It's not either-or choices that we're dealing with here. That's the silliest fiction of all. Sexuality, as close as anything else, is a wheel. You explore every point on the wheel in your many lives, because every point that you explore gives you new knowledge and new understanding. Now, it has been expected and enforced throughout history that man and woman shall come together and procreate and continue to populate the earth. That's the whole point, right? And so naturally, the majority opinion is going to be, throughout history, that you'd better get together, man and woman, and procreate and populate the earth, because that is a deep instinct from your animal human nature. The necessity to be fruitful and multiply. Well, that builds in all of these taboos against anything or anybody that does not contribute to that universal need to repopulate. And while the stigmas and the taboos vary a bit in their intensity from age to age, much of it having to do with the state of the population growth at the time, although not generally recognized to be that, while that does breathe in and out like all of the other rhythms, it has been a constant. Therefore, those that don't behave themselves like proper human beings, and if the man doesn't get together with a woman, but instead thinks and feels, well, I just don't feel that way this time around. I feel like I belong with a man, and I'm going to get together with a man this time. Or someone else who thinks, well, I'll be together with a man next week and a woman tonight. It doesn't matter as far as the spiritual course is concerned, because this is the investigation of the Spirit. All human beings are immortal souls. All of you here in every incarnation to learn of your God nature and to finally become your God nature. There's no difference. But there's a great difference in the experience. And so if there is a life that you choose, and you say, well, I've avoided it long enough, I've got to explore this other aspect of my sexual nature, because it's going to influence not only my understanding of the sexual nature, but it's going to have a deep bearing on all the other issues I'm going to face in this life. Why? Because primarily it is a taboo. No, 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 no. Society is not going to like you. Your parents may well disown you. You will be an outcast, and you're going to explore all of the aspects of all of those issues. In some cases, at the very serious risk of your life. now those whose views have not yet opened, whose understanding is not yet widened, look at this age and think, oh, this must indeed be the end of civilization as we know it, which of course it is. Because they look around and they see homosexuality, blatant homosexuality. And they find evidences of other human beings who don't seem to care who they go to bed with, or what they go to bed with. And yet, at least in this particular society, and in the Western society in general, they're allowed to roam free among decent people. But, of course, the fact is that this era is different. For Western, Christ-influenced human beings, particularly because it is the time of the evolutionary leap. It is the time of the acceptance of the promise. And so spirits are coming into this life, not only who are ancient in their experience of human life, but who have chosen this time to express more fully their sexual natures in ways perhaps they have not done so in other lives, to bring up final accountings of issues that have unfinished endings dangling from many lives, and require the special circumstances of this life so that they may explore these matters, not get killed for it. And yet, nevertheless, experience social difficulty as a result of it. Not to mention guilt. We won't mention that. So this experience is all of the spokes on the wheel you must explore. Don't shake your finger at anyone except one who will use and abuse a brother or sister human being. That is the law. That is the law. And the only law of God having to do with human sexuality. To treat your brother and your sister as you would yourself be treated. And so you look around you in the world and you see all of these matters raising their variously ugly or beautiful heads, depending on your point of view. And you wonder. And then, lo and behold, you find two similar situations arising in the sexual world. Disease. A frightening word and a frightening reality. Disease not only for those misbegotten homosexuals who refuse to breed and procreate and to obey the rules that human society has set, but even all of those who have heterosexual relationships are putting themselves at jeopardy of painful, often cureless, apparently, disease. And so those who find themselves in this life in a situation in which they are married and faithful, look out of their safe houses at the frightening world around them, and they say with a great deal of satisfaction, well, they're getting theirs at last. Whoever they are, whether they are simply those who go around and experiment, or those who don't happen to be married and have one or two or three or four different relationships as they explore their lives and grow, and they are looking at those who have flaunted convention and societal approval, and they say, well, they're getting theirs at last. But the fear permeates them too, because, well, you know, what's showing up is that it's not just them that are getting punished. But I'm going to be punished too, if I'm not careful. If I get bitten by a mosquito that might have bitten a homosexual who might have had AIDS. If I drink at a fountain. If I go to a public bathroom. If I'm not careful who I associate myself with. Well, look at the way this is building. What is it doing? Separating people, one from the other. Building walls of fear to cower behind. It is the growth of the fear energy. It is the response, the polarization that is taking place. Just at the time that for many the sexual nature is being opened, understood, embraced, glorified, expanded, and filled with love, there's Rock Hudson. And all of that fear. And where's the fear? The fear is now leading to hospitals too. Well, you can't go to a hospital for healing and get infected if you get a blood transfusion. You know, most of the fears that have arisen regarding AIDS and other sexually transmitted diseases, particularly AIDS, are nonsense. Absolute nonsense. Couldn't possibly get the disease in the way that everybody thinks you can possibly get the disease. Because it's fear that they're responding to, not reality. Fear that is building upon fear that is building upon fear. And so you embrace that fear. And you don't go to places where there may be, who knows, a homosexual. You stick to your own kind, but you don't trust them either because you never know. And you isolate yourself. And what, my friends, is more frightening for a human being than isolation? Because deep within yourself, you know you're connected to everyone. You can only mask that knowledge. Cement it over. And cower in your own corner. Well, this is going to be growing, and not simply in the sexual arena. Separation one from the other, and that's why we urge all of you who are a part of this evolution, who have accepted the gift and are coming into your wholeness, get to know each other. See each other, visit each other, join in groups together, marry each other, network. What is happening here is happening all over the United States, is happening all over Europe, is happening all over Russia. In different forms, in different names. You can go from here to California and hear the same message, but not quite the same language. You hear the language that you need to hear to make it real for you. And so in every community there is a Plautus. Under a different name, sometimes channeling, sometimes not, using different languages to get the story out, to reassure you that what you're going through is real. Because, you know, you came here to go through with this, and the higher self would lead you into that path, willy-nilly. And suddenly you would find yourself surrounded by fears that are crushing you and frightening you, and you would think, well, what's going on? And so you need to understand, A, that you're not alone, B, that this isn't the end but the beginning, and C, that at last you are ending all of this fear. You can't even imagine a life without fear, a world without fear, yet that is what you are building in this life. You'll experience a taste of it, and if you're very fortunate and the world moves in the best possible way, you'll experience a feast of it. You will experience love, universal. But getting there is half the fun. And that's what you're doing now. You're en route. And you are getting so close to your destination that now at last you may free the last obstacle to your wholeness. And when you heal the sexual nature, you finish the healing in every other area because you are a sexual... The sexual energy, the fear that you've hidden inside of you, when the light shines on it, will end, and the roots of the fear wither and die. Disappear? No, be transformed. The sexuality whole, the being whole. What is that going to mean in your lives? Well, it's going to mean in this life, even long before humanity is generally perfected, or is aware of its perfection. It's going to mean finally, for many of you, finally, a satisfying relationship between equals. A relationship in which you give with open heart and receive with open heart. As many of you have found, it's so much easier to give than to receive, because you feel proud of giving and you feel ashamed of receiving. But that is ending too. And so the relationships that will be yours, and each one of you that wants one will have one. Nobody's going to pull the rug out from under you at the last minute. You're in this process because it is reality. You are redefining reality as a result of the process, and you are recognizing that the reality is more internal than external. That the world that you have lived in and the experiences that you have had and the beliefs that you have held have been more illusion than reality. And now you're digging down to the roots to release the fears that have been hidden there. Now we're going to pause and take a break. And when we return, we've allowed extra time for questions in the anticipation that there may be one or two.
Plautus, is there any particular type of healing stone that would help us out through our first and second chakra blitz that we're about to encounter?
Well, one of the reasons that that this opening understanding of crystal healing and stone healing and so forth has come up is that we are dealing with root issues here. And another thing besides stones is wood. You know, wood while it is living. So it's not a matter of cutting a slice out of a tree and wearing it around your neck. It is being with the living wood. But an oak tree, the oak energy is very good in dealing with this. In crystals and stones, we would suggest this: rather than a particular stone, that you allow your own inner knowledge to choose, because you can pick up a stone and asking if it, before you pick it up, I want a stone to deal with sexual issues, and then pick it up, and you'll know if it's the right one or not. There are stones that are generally good for second chakra issues, but we would say you don't need to generalize. You can be specific in what you need, just as you have those of you that have already chosen crystals to be your healing companions and tools. You can trust yourself to find any healing effect that you need. Yes?
Related to that, then, is Purple Heart any particular, does that have any particular special healing qualities? And do I understand that it has to be actually alive in a tree, or is the wood...
The wood must be living.
Oh, it must be.
Yes.
When are we going to have androgyny?
Well, we're not sure what extent you're taking that, because you are still in this new age that's dawning, still human beings, more human than you have ever been, but still operating within the same physical universe and having the same needs. The population of Earth will not be what it is now, but then again you will be expanding beyond Earth. So it's not a question of needing fewer human beings. You will expand as a race, and of course that's going to require a certain amount of copulation. And so in that sense, a true androgynous race is not going to arise. You are still going to be dealing with matters from wide degrees of perspective. You are still going to have mission and purpose. You are still going to be individuals uniting with other individuals to form a greater energy as you begin to recognize each other more clearly in energy terms. But nonetheless, great individual difference. That is at the core of the human experience, is that element of separation. Well, you are healing the separation while remaining human beings. And so, as we've indicated in the past, human relationships are going to change, and it is not going to be so much one-on-one. There are going to be groups of 3 and groups of 6 and groups of 9, and there are going to be a variety of sexual relationship groupings that will be, in a sense, more specialized than the general kind of relationship that you're used to in these experiences that you've been having in this era.
It's been bugging me for some time. Well, it was all started out a long time ago. It was about 3 months or 4 months ago. It was back during the school year. You told me that the first time I came to you, you told me I had some kind of, I wanted to learn about my past, and you told me I had some kind of psychic powers that I could develop. Well, then I saw this vision of this man, and it looked like he was some kind of rock star or something, and he was in concert, and he was playing this electric guitar, and he was playing the song ended, and somebody shot him, and he died. I want to know if I was just making that up, or if it was really something if it was really some psychic thing, it's been bugging me for a long time.
No, you weren't making it up, but you were seeing symbols. It was not, in this case, it was not actually a rock star, but one who shone with that kind of charisma, that kind of energy that makes people look and applaud and follow. And the death that you saw was real, and this is something that is going to be seen next year, perhaps late this year, but it looks like next year, where a major figure, individual, is going to be shot on stage.
Plautus? By any chance, Julian Lennon, it looked something like him.
We won't go into detail as to who it is at this point. Yes?
Plautus is the next generation of children that are coming through. Their issues are being so much different. And with my son that's 9, I see that he's got so many masculine tendencies of power. And he loves fire, he loves strength, he loves domineering. He also is extremely sexual and has been since he was a very little boy. And the story was, Charlotte and I were talking about him before we got here. And I was wondering why, or what the generation of children next are going to be dealing with. Is it going to be a completely different story than what we have, or an extension?
Well, no, it's not going to be completely different, because you're talking about generations that overlap here, and this is not... You're not talking about the remote future. You're talking about a time that is still in transition. We've said before that you, of your age and beyond, who are here tonight and representing so many others, are pioneers in this process. You're going to be instrumental in leading and in illustrating and showing others the way. But your children, too, really are pioneers. We're not talking about it. We're talking about a process of evolution that is complete in its essence in a single generation, but that continues, and really the new age that's dawning isn't going to flower for a couple of 100 years into its full, well, maybe longer than that, into its full potential. there is an extended time of transition where the ways of the past gradually change, and you may look for analogies into history at turning points, such as the turning point in the Western world of the time of Christ on earth, and seeing the ancient institutions falling into disrepair and dying, and the consciousness of a people changing, but changing over a period of several hundred years. Well, many factors have changed since then, and this evolutionary step is different from that. But so the time period will not be as extended. But your children are going to be, in essence, going through the same process that you have, with the difference that they have been receiving Christ energy for a longer period of time, and the process will be accelerated in them. But nonetheless, they're still becoming, in the act of becoming.
Is there a purpose for Ian being the type of person that he is, being brought to me, the mother that I've always been? Because he's just I look at him and I can't understand where in the world he's coming from, but I allow it to happen and speak through it. Could you give me some understanding of his being?
The lessons that he is involved with are related also to the lessons of the Father. And if you will look on him in that light, as they act in ways to mirror each other, you will see that this process is not going to be completed until later in adolescence, and relating to family conditions directly relating to the Father.
Plautus, it's believed that Jesus, the man, was celibate, and the Catholic Church believes in celibacy also for their priests. What do you have to say about that? Yes, well, those
poor priests have been celibate all these years for nothing, because Jesus was by no means celibate. Jesus came here to be, Christ came into human form to experience humanity and to act as a model for humanity, and to eschew a central factor of human life simply would not and did not make sense. And in fact, Jesus, the man, Jesus the Christ, was not sexually active to the end of his life, but he was very sexually active for many years. In fact, though he begat no children.
I was going to ask a question similar to that. There is this, maybe the same question. Also, people are saying that Gandhi and others, Muhammad, Buddha, did not have sex as they became more spiritually evolved. Is that what you're saying about Jesus, and is that what you're...
No, we understand that you would draw that conclusion. No, we're not saying that sexual impulse disappears with wholeness. Not at all. It simply takes its proper place as being a source of joy. But the sexual nature of humanity is still the sexual nature of humanity. It is still the root. It is only now that the roots nourish and that they are not poisoned as this process continues. And so we look at spiritual leaders up until this time may indeed have chosen a path that did not involve overt sexuality. We guarantee you they didn't avoid the issues of sexuality. The Buddha is a different case, a different story. We won't explore that now. Yes?
This week there's been all kinds of news in the papers about the sexual assault trial in Madison. And I don't really have a very specific question about the nature of sexual assault and rape, but it seems to tie in with this, and I'm wondering if you could discuss it.
Well, yes, it's, as we've indicated before, fear issues are building as the polarization increases. And since the sexual area is the chief repository of basic and fundamental fear issues, that is going to increase greatly and obviously also. And so here we have a situation that brings fear on several levels. And the dismissal of the charges are not the least of these in the matter of increasing the boldness of those who would take advantage and increasing the fear of those who may be taken advantage of by impugning the believability of the woman in this case. That is a single individual who is acting in a sense as a representative of many, and may be looked on in that light. Here we have also, in a white society already frightened of the black male particularly, black males outnumbering this poor white woman 3-1, and therefore bringing into reality all of these underlying fears regarding the black male, regarding power, regarding the sense of helplessness, and the sense, furthermore, of not being believed. So it is acting to increase fear issues. We won't get into the personal issues that are involved in these specific people, because what has happened here in Minneapolis and in Wisconsin, in the area interested in this particular event, is happening all over. Similar events taking place that are simply stimulus to fear, because, as we've indicated before, we want to underline, as the Christ energy was released, an enormous change took place, and fears that had been building received new growth, because the polarization was so greatly increased by this release of love energy, even though it was released as a trickle that gradually grows. Even that trickle caused a reverberation that brought out the reverse, that brought out the negative pole. And if the positive pole is extended all that far, then the negative pole is going to be extended all that far. And so all of these fears are going to be exacerbated by the influence of the Christ energy. And so just as you in your own lives are responding initially with confusion, but with increasingly with greater understanding and control and perspective, so on the other end of the scale, those who are frightened and those who are not, whose choice it is not to be involved in the evolutionary leap in this reality, are having their fears equally increased. And it is that splitting apart, that polarization, that increasing of the tension on either end, that finally will result in the collapse into oneness, in which the negative energy will be transformed into positive energy, and the process will be complete. But that's a while yet. The fear energy increases, and you look at the news, you look at your television and your newspaper, and you see what is taking place. You see the increasing stress on the human being. Fear of natural disaster. Now, what is more frightening than a natural disaster, a, quote, act of God, where there is not even the illusion that human beings have any control over it? You know, you may harbor the illusion that you have some control over crime or some potential control over war, but not over drought, and not over heat waves, and not over earthquakes, and not over volcanoes, and not over tornadoes. So all of those are increasing, not necessarily with a great loss of life, not necessarily with the headline grabbing features of a disaster so complete as to awaken those who would sleep, but rather to eat away gradually at the sense of security in the very earth you walk upon. Those of you who are attaining your freedom and the responsibility that goes with that no longer need to, or in fact do, fear such disasters, knowing that nothing can possibly happen to you that is not in your path, that is not of your purpose. And that isn't fatalism, that's faith. You've made a bargain. And as you live up to your bargain in your willingness, God lives up to the other side of the agreement. You are here to serve and to help, to heal and to grow, not to die, not to be defeated, not to have all of your worst fears come true. That cannot be universally said. And so on the natural level, you have a great upsurge in these calamities and these great difficulties. So is it, as you look in the media, you see revolution and saber rattling and terrorism, all of which is calculated to do the same thing, to raise the temperature to the boiling point, to increase the polarity to the breaking point, finally to allow the breakthrough. But you must also look upon those events and circumstances that are not as well reported nor as clearly understood. The beginnings of the use of the Christ energy to heal the world and to heal humanity. And you will see great evidence of that also. But the fear energy has had a long time to build up, and the Christ energy has only now been released. And while your numbers are growing daily, you are still in a very small minority in this changing world. So you will see at first, if you are not fooled, you will think, well, the world has definitely had it. That too many things are going wrong, and the center cannot hold, and disaster is at every hand. But that is the greatest illusion of the fear that is itself illusion. Not that there cannot be nuclear war, not that there cannot be major disasters causing the loss of large numbers of human lives. They not only can be, but are possible. But the fear itself is illusion because it is not a reality that you have no control over. It is a reality that you can create in negative form or positive form. You are engaged in creating a positive reality. Those others are engaged in reconfirming to themselves their negative, fear-ridden view of reality. So initially, that's going to build at the expense, apparently, of the growth of the love energy. But give it some time, and you'll see the balance begin to shift. But not yet.
Plautus, I feel inclined to have you readdress a question that was asked before about androgyny, and it may be an interpretation on my part, but I believe that she may have been referring to the male, what is called the male and the female energy within an individual coming into a balance.
Oh, yes. Well, that is coming, yes. What's happening there is that not that everybody is going to be completely alike in their energy, but that the energies will be balanced. That the issue of guilt, the issue of fear, the darkness versus light aspect of the human being on the sexual level as well as other levels will be healed. There will nonetheless be human beings who choose to be more on the masculine end of things and others who choose more to be on the feminine end of things. There are still going to be men and there are still going to be women. The point is that the issues that separate, that divide, that cause pain and anguish will be ended. And the positive aspects of the masculinity, the positive aspects of the femininity, and the positive aspects of the joining together will be accentuated. But as we say, it's not going to be that everyone is going to be interchangeable.
Now that I asked that for her, I want to ask one for me. And this hasn't been brought up, so I'd like to kind of just have you talk about it. I sense within myself such a premonition of what's going to happen to me that brings the fear so strong after listening to you in the first half that I'm wondering if in meditation I can kind of ask for a padded room to appear. But I wonder if you can deal with that issue of fear and how...
Well, of course, what we're saying is going to raise the fear level of everyone who's actively involved with sexual fear issues, because it implies crisis. It implies having to finally look with clear eyes and shaking knees at what has confounded you, threatened you, frightened you, sent you running off in your sexual nature. And if that is a frightening prospect to you, so be it. The fear itself, understand, we're only dealing with illusion. However realistic it may seem, however influential on your behavior it has been, the deep recognition that it is illusion that comes to you in this process, as it has come with lesser matters, will extend to this. So while at the same time we're triggering perhaps an onrush of fear response, also we are triggering your ability to respond positively to that fear issue. In other words, you're not going to run away from matters. Your fear is not going to prevent you from dealing with what you have already chosen to deal with. Always remember, fear exaggerates. The image is always more frightening than the reality. Even when disaster falls. You know, it said the coward dies 1,000 times before his death and the brave person but once. If you build the fear, if you live in the fear, if you caress the fear, if you hold the fear to you and hug it to your bosom, you are giving it more and more apparent power and making matters more and more difficult. And it'll be more and more difficult to recognize the reality that lies behind the fear when you have built the fear up to such exaggerated proportions. The bark is worse than the bite.
So how do we now keep from building it? Say that if it...
By, as we have indicated, reaffirming your willingness to allow the process to go through. It's not different in kind than anything else you have faced. You have loosened those roots through the process that you have gone through before. That's why this is saved till last. Because all that you have done in your process of preparation, in your healing, has loosened these issues. They may look like a solid wall to you, but if you give it a good shove, it'll fall over.
The use of a Ouija board either by children or adults?
Yes, we've spoken of this a number of times, and we recommend strongly against it. It is a focal point of energy that is not under control. Generally, it is operated by individuals who have no idea what they're doing and no idea how to protect themselves from the results. While fear is an illusion, fear entities exist. They exist and feed on human fears, but while those fears live, so do they. They are drawn to apertures in reality. They are drawn to the openings that you create for them to act. Now, it's not that a Ouija spirit is going to materialize and gobble you up, but rather that you are going to get misinformation, false information, frightening information, confusing information, and generally waste your time, if not worse. You have all of the answers within you. You do not need a Ouija board. You do not need any outside means. You may use something to help you concentrate, you know, like some seers use a crystal ball, and some use other means, tarot cards or what have you, to help them focus and concentrate. But that's not the same. It is internal. It is meditation. It is communicating with your own higher self. There are ways to do that are perfectly reliable and predictable. And the Ouija board is not a good door.
Yeah. I'd like to readdress the issue that we had about as the spirituality grows within a person and how the sexual manifestation takes place. And my image of this has been different from the suspicion that I brought up earlier. And my image of this is that it just gets better in quality, probably more in longevity for each individual experience, fewer actual experiences in number, and a lot more psychic.
Yes.
And
more complete union. Union that is not simply physical and not simply emotional and not simply physical and emotional, but that is spiritual.
Yeah.
And that can only come with the recognition that the sexuality is also the home of the spirit. while it is viewed as the enemy, while it is viewed as an ogre, then you cannot communicate and have that spiritual union in a complete sense.
Also about that, I would like to know, why is it then that Jesus got to a point where he began to not have sexual experiences? What was evolving there? What was happening?
It was only in the very last stages where he was well, for one thing, he was extremely busy. Also, there was an issue of jealousy growing. It was no longer possible for him to engage in these normal human practices for his experience, for his understanding and growth, as another human being might. He was too much aglow. And the practice became divisive. And he had learned what he needed to understand. He had participated fully. He had fallen in love. He had been hurt in love. And he transcended that finally. You know, he went through everything that you've gone through countless lifetimes in that one brief life experience to show us as human beings the way.
Dr. Ruth seems to deal with sexual issues in a superficial way. Do you have a comment on that?
This approach, yes, we would say that in a sense it's superficial in that it does not directly refer to the spirit, but it is definitely involved as a helper in changing conditioning, opening notions of possibility, and the recognition that change is possible, healing and growth is possible. It is humanizing and bringing into a general popular light issues and questions that have been deeply buried and very much the source of guilt and anguish. And so it is a preparatory kind of ministry that is being served, and we will assure you that the dear lady in question is a guide of great experience and of great knowledge, and one we know well.
Was she Sigmund Freud in a former life, as someone suggested?
No, she was not.
Does she
was not so tormented.
Does she have a past life as a known, people that are in that cycle where they are well known or often have other lives in which they were, that we just kind of...
Yes, of course, as all do, but we want to be very general about this because what is important is what she is doing now. She has chosen this work and reached this degree of understanding because of course, other life experiences in which, of course, she was both victim and victimizer, where she was involved in this cluster of lives in sexual issues from a variety of viewpoints. And this is the life in which she has healed and is sharing that healing.
If I respond to the physical manifestation of fear, will I give fear more power over me?
Yes. If you respond to fear in any form, then you give it more power, because you're dealing with a reality that you create completely on the subjective level. Your life is entirely in your hands as to how it appears to you and how you react to it. And so it is that with any fear, as you respond to the fear, react to the fear, let the fear be your guide and let the fear be your owner, then you make it stronger each time. If you run from the fear, you also make it stronger. That's also giving it power. You must recognize that you, that conscious, ego-oriented aspect of yourself can't do a damn thing about this fear. And take the monkey off your back. You don't have the responsibility for that. You are surrendering that responsibility, who, to someone out there? No. To that aspect of yourself that knows how to deal with it and where it comes from. Before the duality is healed, it is important for the ego self, who thinks it's been in charge all this time and in charge alone, to recognize, A, that it's not in charge and not in charge alone, and that there are things that it can't do, and that it has the trust and the faith to let go and let this theoretical being called the higher self somehow take charge. It's a frightening thing to do in itself. But when you let the higher self take charge, when you trust, and all you have to say is, I'm willing to go through all this. I don't know how to do it. I don't know what's going on. I don't know how not to be afraid. It's not your responsibility, so don't punish yourself and say, oh dear, I'm still afraid, I'm no good. Because you're not. So you let go and let the process take over, and the process, guided by higher self, will lead you in exactly the way you need to go, exactly the encounters that you need, however fearful they may seem to the ego self, will lead you exactly the route you need to be led in order to find your freedom. So, when the ghosts come up and say, boo, don't run from them, and don't say, oh, how afraid I am of these ghosts, but say, all right, you're ghosts, and yes, that's right, it does scare me, but so what? And you'll be able to say so what, because you know the onus is not on you to figure out how you're going to deal with this, but to know that you will.
You've said before that we have the choice whether or not to become pregnant.
Yes.
When we're
yes.
having sex or whatever. Can you somehow clarify? I've been using mental birth control, but every once in a while I feel like I kind of lose confidence in it. Does it become ineffective?
Well, because you're still in transit. You're not complete. You're not whole yet. Now, when you're completely whole, then you'll have complete charge. Then you will give the message to your body, another part of your wholeness, and say, well, this is the time, and it's everything's appropriate, and I want to get pregnant, and you'll get pregnant. And then the rest of the time, you'll say, no, not now. We don't want it now. And it'll work just fine. Now, it is a leap of faith that you are taking. And of course, in any leap of faith, there comes a point where you look down and you say, it's an awful long way down there. And then you think, oh, I'm going to fall for sure. Well, you're not going to fall, but the fear will be there. If the higher self, which you are in incomplete communication with, knows that it is, for whatever reason, important now that you do become pregnant, even though the outer self may respond with horror, you have surrendered to higher self. If that should happen, then you say, well, I don't see why this is happening, but I will trust that it is the proper thing. You are in incomplete understanding with higher self. So you are surrendering to that inner knowledge. And so when you say you spiritual or psychic birth control, well, that is going to work just fine. You'll only have a baby. You'll only get pregnant when you need to. But you, on the outside, may not agree that that's the right time at all.
Plautus, how will we know when our sexual nature has been completely healed?
Oh, you'll know. You'll know. How do you know when it stops raining? You don't get wet.
So if the fear issues are gone from your life, then your sexual nature is healed?
Yeah, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And you have that capability in this lifetime, each and every one. But it's not going to happen overnight any more than the rest. This is the toughest part, because it's the most deeply rooted.
So if you think your fear issues are healed, are you sort of fooling yourself?
Oh, well, you can play a con game on yourself, certainly, and convince yourself on that level, but that's allowing the intellect, the ego self, to create a sort of shadow spirituality that in order to avoid what it's scared stiff of, will say, well, I've already dealt with that, so, it's no problem now. But if it is a problem indeed, it will rear up and you'll have to deal with it because you've given over to the higher self, because you don't really want to hide, you don't really want to avoid. And you recognize that the ego may sometimes try to hide things from you when you know you don't really want them hidden. That's why you trust the higher self to reveal what is important to be revealed. We'd like perhaps one more question and then we will close.
Earlier times, not so much today, you talked about more of discovery of practice of unconditional love.
Yes.
But we haven't heard that much tonight about it and how it relates to sexuality.
Well, we thought we had indicated that because it is as a response. The unconditional love is the gift of the Christ that you are all receiving. It takes time to revise, to change, to release all of the impedimenta that have grown within you. Universal love cannot be switched on or switched off, but that aspect will be felt in the healing. And since you are all becoming one, it's not the focus of this particular message, but it is the underlying principle that you are all becoming one, and that is the goal of this entire process. And as you go through this process, you realize that goal bit by bit. And so it is with the sexuality, as with all human characteristics, that you are not separate one from the other, that you all share this issue, and you all share the ability to heal the issue. And as the time moves forward, and universal love becomes more than a hopeful theory, but a practicing daily activity, it will permeate the sexual nature also and cause great social and personal change. So now we're going to end this message, and we thank you all for your attention and bid you Godspeed as your journey continues to open.